But she believed so deeply in an America where a moment like this is possible. And so I am thinking about her and about the generations of women, Black women, Asian, white, Latina, Native American women who throughout our nation's history have paved the way for this moment tonight. Women who fought and sacrificed so much for equality and liberty and justice for all, including the Black women who are too often overlooked, but so often prove they are the backbone of our democracy.
Keisa Oquinn is a social worker who has traveled with individuals through the worlds of correction, counseling, disability services, mental health, and substance abuse. What sets her apart as a leader and advocate in the field is her ability to creatively seek solutions in difficult situations, as well as her focus on person-centered planning strategies. Ms. Oquinn holds a master's in social work from Portland State University. She has been in the field of developmental disability since 2003, starting as an employment specialist, support employment program manager, and a personal agent in Vancouver and in Oregon's brokerage system. Ms. Oquinn is an avid spectator who enjoys watching sporting events, comedy shows, theater, movies, and generally saying yes to new opportunities and activities that cross her path. Her primary focus includes transition, person-centered planning, community building, and diversity initiatives. So I want to start off with, in these times that we're in right now, in these changing times, how would you rate where they are now?
Well, thank you for having me and having this conversation with me. Actually, we have gotten to know each other pretty well over the past year. And so it's nice to be on the back end of questions instead of on the front end of questions. And in thinking about your question and where I think where Black women are, where our community is in general, it's a time for innovation, and it's a time for us to think about where we can lean into our gifts, our strengths, and our capacities and start to define what work needs to look like for us. Because many of us, and I would say maybe in the Northwest, because that's where I live in Seattle, Washington area, many people have positions that are no longer there. They're gone. COVID took the positions away, or they had, so people are really needing to redefine what their roles are today. So it's been amazing where I've seen some people really lean in and they had some thoughts about work and defining what work looks like for them and starting to live out their passion and using this as a time to branch off and start to do that work around, again, arts, around consulting. That I've seen a lot of movement around consulting. People maybe have been in a profession for most of their life and now they're taking that and they're trying to figure out how they can advise and support and train other people to do things that they're familiar with. I think things around that are people-oriented one-on-one work, those are probably jobs that are more challenging to get into right now because of COVID and our inability to be out and be next to people. Jobs related to tech and being on screen and guiding people through self-help opportunities and training opportunities and coaching opportunities that are virtual, I think are all places where Black women and Black people as a community can start to see themselves move forward in this new norm.
With the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been going on for the last couple months, a lot of companies I support Black Lives Matter, I believe in Black Lives Matter, but when you look at their board or when you look at their executive team, it doesn't necessarily reflect that. What would you suggest that companies who really do believe that Black Lives Matter and want to make a difference and want to make a change, what would you suggest for them for their board to reflect or their leadership team to reflect that belief?
I work for an organization who has been experiencing a lot of change and some identity change around Black Lives Matter. So I've worked in my field for 16 years, and I work for the agency I currently work with for 3 years now. And it has been conversations about diversity and equity. And I think because I'm Black, I've been really leaning in around what does that look like for Black people. So I think it has to start with a place where you have to have some internal conversations and really be clear about how you want to move forward. Do you want this to be about you want to look good, or do you want to do good? And if you want to do good, then I think you have to have some really concrete conversations around equity. You need to have an equity statement. You need to kind of then go out and search for members who identify with the community that you want to be a part of, to be a part of your board. So you have to do an intentional outreach to those people. And then I think really be strategic and not just finding people who look Black, but people who are really, their message and their actions and their professional career is really about advancing opportunities forward for African American or Black people. I think that's really important. I think I've seen a lot of messaging like right after Black Lives Matter, like my email was full of messages of statements of support. But I think that's really hypocritical, right? You need to not just put up a statement. You actually need to do the work. I think is more important than just doing the statement. It's around authenticity. It's about being face forward and being vulnerable. And I think that's more important even than just dumping people onto your board who may not really have an impact. So what is the culture that you're trying to emulate? What is it that you want to do for the employees that you already have in your company to show them that Black Lives Matter? I think is a really important place to start.
Okay, excellent. I would totally agree with you because a lot of times people will say Black Lives Matter, we're going to do this, but let's put our money where our mouth is, where we actually move forward and not just talk and there's action. So I like exactly what you said.
And I appreciate that because and I think regionally things look different, right? So what's happening in Georgia is very different than what's happening in Washington State and Oregon, where, I grew up in Oregon and I now live in Washington State. But how we look at Black Lives Matter and our agenda for change, I think is different than what it looks like in the South, and it looks different than what's in the Northeast. And so I think that's really important to think about in our messaging around Black Lives Matter and employment, specifically like the intersection of who's showing up, how are we recruiting, what do we want people to do when they come in? So do we just want them to come in at the entry level, or are we creating opportunities for people to be promoted? Are we robust in our opportunities for people? And I think I have seen sometimes in the Northwest, it's not the case. So there might be one or two people who are the tokenized person in the work environment, and then other people are held to entry level positions. So I think that's a really strategic place to think about. Do Black Lives Matter? Some of the you had asked me about women specifically, and I think that in the Northwest there tend to be a lot of women who are single with children who are in positions, and so how are you also creating an opportunity for them to thrive and be promoted, and thinking about the supports it takes for them to be employed and gainfully employed, I think is really important also.
Right. So we're going to move towards unemployment, and I'm going to give you some facts, and I just want your opinion. Tell me what you think. This is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. In 2019, the third quarter. So we're going to do third quarter of 2019 and 2020. That's what the data that we're looking at now between women ages 25 to 54. So the unemployment rate in 2019 for white women was 3.2%. That was in 2019. This year, of course, with the pandemic, a lot of 35 million people are unemployed. So the rate's higher, but it's 7.7% in 2020. Black women in 2019, it was 4.4% in 2019. Now, 2020, it's 11.4%. Asian women, 2.1% in 2019. Currently now, 10.2%. And Hispanic women, 4.1%. And currently, 10.7% in 2020. Out of all those numbers, the black woman has the most unemployment rate in 2019 and currently now, even more than other races. How would you describe that? What is your opinion on that?
Well, I'm really disappointed. I work in the field of supported employment, and I work with adults seeking employment. Our company does technical assistance and training and thinking about how do you get people to work. So this is really a relevant issue for me. But I typically don't think about it from the standpoint of African American women and their rates. But because I am one, and what I just heard you say is very impactful. And in some ways, it surprises me, but doesn't surprise me. So on the surprises me end is because we are so educated. Like, we are outpacing other people when it comes to bachelor's and master's degrees. And so you would think that we would have more access to employment and be more competitively employed. However, I'm noticing in some areas that women, Black women specifically, are doing more jobs that are considered essential worker jobs. And those, a lot of those jobs have been lost. And so that makes me think that is a valid number that you said when I think about, working class women in those positions and their inability to be in management or other opportunities where jobs are typically more protected. I think we're not having the opportunities to access to get into jobs, and then we're the first to go often. We don't have seniority, and we don't have, we're not accessing the protections that I think white women or Asian women are in the workplace. So, it's funny you asked me that question, and I stumble a bit because I have a emotional response to that. I think about my own self, and I'm in that demographic that you talk about. I happen to have a master's, but I think about my own challenge with accessing positions and like knowing the right people to have opportunities and working for organizations where I feel like I'm at risk of losing my job before my peers. And so it's not just a thought question, it's a heart question.
Right. I have personally myself been with a company who, the black people have master's degrees, even doctor degrees, and their white counterpart has just a bachelor's and making $20,000-$30,000 more than, the women of color, the black women. And I always thought that was astounding to me. My mom used to say, go back to school and get, more education. How much more education can you get to be equal? I mean, you have somebody literally with a doctorate degree making far less than someone who's in a higher position, the same experience, same amount of years of experience. And I think that my question is, what can we do to help ourselves? Clearly it's not education. Clearly it's not that, because how much more education do we need to get to equal? But what would you say? A mentoring program, or what would you say to help?
I do. I think mentorship is really powerful to help open doors for people who otherwise would not have access. I also think that there's the benefit of, if someone's gone before me, you can teach me about the workplace culture that I need to learn how to adapt. And I think that's sometimes where we have not learned how to pivot. And I think that's different than when we code switch. I think there's a difference when you code switch, where we're talking one way with one group of people and then a different way with people that we know well. Right. I think there's some strategy, though, in knowing what the culture is that you need to be able to foster in within yourself, the ability to show up in that culture and to navigate it and to speak the language, but then also be able to maintain some authenticity about who you are and to show up wholly as that person. So I think we need to learn how to pivot and really learn how to navigate that space. The other thing, though, that is like uncomfortable to talk about is sometimes some of us get really good jobs and we stay in good jobs and we don't bring people along with us. It's almost like our security blanket is such that if I'm the only one here and right. I might be the token, there's some safety and they won't let me go because I need to be here. Right. I think that we need to move away from that mindset, and it needs to be I walk through, who else can come with?
Right.
And that, when you think about people who've gotten really good jobs, often who happen to not be Black, they didn't get it based on education and merit, right? They got it based on their connection to somebody else who vouched for them to get through the door.
Right.
So I think that's one of the ways that we need to start positioning ourselves and not using our titles as leverage against each other. So one of the reasons why I started my Sister's Keeper Northwest was, right, how do we start to make connections with each other and not compete?
Right.
How do we not become so consumed on I'm doing better than you are, so I'm better and it helps my esteem, to shifting to I'm working with you and we together are doing better, and that's more powerful. So kind of to sum that up, I think we need to figure out how to network. We need to not do the crabs in the barrel saying and bring people with us through the door. We need mentorship. And I think really coming from a place of empathy and thinking about helping other people understand the culture that they will need to be able to navigate.
Okay. Excellent. I want to thank you for taking time out your busy schedule. I know you are a very busy woman, but for taking time to answer some questions and maybe help educating people on these different topics that we talked about today. So thank you very much for coming today.
And thank you for the opportunity. You know, I'm a person who's really about relationships, and I'm non-conventional in most of what I do, and I'm not a linear A to Z, and this is how we're supposed to do things. And so I also want to reflect back to you my admiration for your organization, what you're doing in your community, and your ability to really be a leader. I've seen you be very innovative, create new partnerships, really leveraging opportunities for your company, which then impacts your community in your ability to get people connected to jobs and to real jobs, not things that is something to do, but it's something that's about getting people out of poverty, getting them connected to community, keeping people out of isolation, and getting them to be a part of inclusion. So I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Struggle, their determination, and the strength of their vision to see what can be unburdened by what has been. But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.